Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christie's. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a new Prime Minister. Wait a minute, didn't we do this story last month? Oh, I can't even be bothered with the cheap gags anymore. King Charles has been on the throne so long, he's already on his second PM. We reach back into the mists of time for comparison, just as Liz Truss crushed George Canning's brief tenure to become the shortest-serving Prime Minister. There, that's George Canning, or it's Liz without her hairpiece. I'm not sure at this stage. But at any rate, Liz has beaten George Canning to become the shortest-serving Prime Minister in British history, and likewise, Rishi Sunak is the youngest Prime Minister since the second Earl of Liverpool took office the day after his 42nd birthday in 1812. That's the second Lord Liverpool. Rishi wouldn't be caught dead in a cheap get-up like that. His suits are far better made. Here's another historic first. This one's quite remarkable, really. Mr. and Mrs. Sunak are twice as rich as the King and Queen. More tellingly, this is the only time in the modern era that this long-established parliamentary democracy has had two successive prime ministers take office without a general election since, on the one hand, Chamberlain and Churchill in the Second World War, and on the other, Asquith and Lloyd George in the First World War, which suggests that two successive PMs without democratic legitimacy is not normal outside global conflagration. And yet it has just happened. We'll try to figure it out with Toby Young and Patrick O'Flynn, and a chap who backed Boris, Sir Christopher Chope. Plus, Vicky Spit is here with some unfinished business from the old regime. And as I always say, politicians only matter if politics matters. It doesn't matter whether your big concern is immigration, the cost of living, the Northern Ireland Protocol, the clinically dead NHS, the child rape gangs infesting English cities, the victims of the COVID vaccines. If neither Liz, nor Rishi, nor Boris, nor Penny, and now neither Rishi nor Keir plan to do anything about anything that matters, then what's the diff? As Ryan was saying to Nigel just before the weather. We'll get into one rather important aspect of that tonight with Yasmin Mohammed. And, of course, The most important part of the show, that's you. Email me, ask me anything you'd like, gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet me at gbnews. A full hour of news and analysis coming your way after Polly Middlehurst with the latest headlines.
Mark, thank you, and good evening. The top story, of course, Rishi Sunak will become the UK Prime Minister tomorrow after Liz Truss has chaired her final cabinet meeting and visited the King at Buckingham Palace. Mr Sunak was applauded by Tory MPs as he arrived at the Conservative Party headquarters earlier, where he spoke for the first time since becoming leader. He won the contest after Penny Mordaunt withdrew her candidacy earlier on today. Mr Sunak warned the UK faces a profound economic challenge and said his priority was to bring the party and the country together.
It is the greatest privilege of my life to be able to serve the party I love and give back to the country I owe so much to. The United Kingdom is a great country, but there is no doubt we face a profound economic challenge. We now need stability and unity, and I will make it my utmost priority to bring our party and our country together.
Well, the Culture Secretary, Michelle Donnellan, told GB News earlier on today, everyone should now throw their full support behind the incumbent Prime Minister.
Going to face some tough challenges. Nobody has been shy in acknowledging that, including Rishi himself. But his top priority, and the top priority of all Conservative members of Parliament, will be supporting people through this winter.
Meanwhile, Labour's Deputy Leader Angela Rayner accused Rishi Sunak of not having a mandate or saying a single word about how he'll run the country.
Everybody who I've spoken to, the public have said we should be having a general election. There is no mandate now. The Conservatives have completely broken their promises, broke our economy, and now they want to see a general election. They can't just keep doling out prime ministers every month because they're in total chaos and they've lost control of the market and haven't got any ideas of how they're going to tackle the cost of living that people are facing.
Well, in other news, ministers have been told the government must intervene within the next 24 hours to stop Doncaster Sheffield Airport from going out of business. The Labour MP Stephanie Peacock appealed to the government to step up and said potential investors in the airport needed certainty. But the Transport Minister, Catherine Fletcher, defended the government's response and suggested local authorities find a commercial solution themselves. The airport's owner, Peel Group, announced last month it would close at the end of this month because the airport wasn't financially viable. Lastly, Royal Mail workers will return to the picket line tomorrow, protesting outside sorting offices and delivery offices across the country. The Communication Workers Union says more strikes are planned in the coming weeks if efforts to reach a pay deal fail. BT, Openreach employees and 999 call handlers walked off the job today in a similar dispute, with the CWU again demanding a proper pay rise that's in line with inflation. Those are your latest news stories. You're up to date on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, the People's Channel, where now it's time for Mark Steyn.
Say what you like about the diminished state of a great nation that once governed a quarter of the earth, but we're still capable of producing a woman who can be Prime Minister for 3 weeks. Now, forget about that. A woman who can play the piano with her penis. The publicly owned Channel 4 at its finest.
TV is I can do stupid stuff like this.
Oh, come on, wait a minute. Why did we have to pixelate her fabulous nude form? I'm under double investigation from Ofcom, so I'm always interested in what you can get away with, what Ofcom will let you do on British TV, and they apparently let you show your full form in its full naked loveliness, as Jordan Gray did just there, after which She then tickled the ivories with her meat and 2 veg. Fantastic. Roll on the Bechstein Grand. My penis has got a sudden yen to play the Moonlight Sonata. But Ofcom, we have to pixelate it, but Ofcom is cool with it going out on Channel 4. Actually, I don't know whether Michael Grade plays the piano, but I'd like to invite him on our show so we can do the Schubert Sonata for 4 hands and 2 penises. Failing with that, we'll do Heart and Soul. Michael Grade's penis can do the low-hanging part, the dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun, and mine will do the treble. Blink, 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 a blinky, blinky, blink. Britain leads the world in be-penised women, and yet we're our ruling class to disrobe with the gay abandon of Miss Grey. One can't help wondering whether there'd be anything underneath at all. I appreciate that this is something of a childish metaphor, but in the self-Moronized political culture that has left us with a choice between Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer, it's the best I can muster. This week's Prime Minister has sold himself to the country as the chap who can get us out of this mess, which ought to be plausible, as he's largely the chap who got us into this mess. I mean, a fellow wouldn't shut down the entire economy if he didn't have an on switch to open it all up again, would he? Well, we did it to, quote, protect the NHS. How's that working out? The NHS waiting list across the United Kingdom is at a record high, about 8 million people. That's actually bigger than the population of Scotland and Northern Ireland combined, so perhaps we should make waitlist Stan a 5th home nation and let it enter the Commonwealth Games. Ah, well, it's worked out well for Rishi, the first British Prime Minister with an American green card, although he claims to have disowned that, discarded that. I'm not actually sure that's how it works under US law. But I don't blame him. It always helps to have a backup plan, like a mansion in California. As for his new subjects, if you haven't yet made your dosh, if you haven't yet bought a flat, if you haven't yet secured an appointment with a GP, you may be getting the vague feeling that in a comprehensively wrecked United Kingdom, all these things are slipping beyond the bounds of possibility. Just to make that a little more specific, if you've worried that your stage 2 cancer might be metastasizing into stage 4 cancer, how many prime ministers do you think you'll have gone through before you get an appointment with a consultant? But don't worry, his ascendance has reassured the markets. By the way, what are the markets? It sounds like an upscale cul-de-sac on the edge of Leamington Spa. Toby Young is the founder of the Daily Sceptic and the Free Speech Union. He voted for Liz, the Thatcher de nos jours, and then he backed the restoration of Boris, the king across the water on the nude beaches of the Dominican Republic. So Toby has an unerring instinct for total losers. How are you feeling about this guy, Toby? Is he going to pull it off, or is he going to go the way of how many, what are we up to now? 1, 2, 3, 4 Tory predecessors?
Well, Mark, you wait 70 years for a coronation and then 2 come along at once. I feel, as a Tory member, I have to say, a little bit disgruntled. The parliamentary party gave me and my fellow members a choice between Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak about 6 weeks ago. They made it clear that they preferred Rishi, but the choice was ours as members of the party. We'd paid our dues and it was a democratic organisation and we were going to get to have the final say. And we had our say and we chose Liz Truss. What did the parliamentary party do? They decided they didn't like Liz Truss. They wanted their original choice, so they got rid of her and installed Rishi Sunak without consulting us. So I do feel a little bit disgruntled, a little bit unhappy as a Conservative Party member.
Well, just let's unpack that, as the cool kids say, a little, because it is not, as I pointed out, it's a fact that we've never before had 2 incoming prime ministers who move into number 10 without benefit of a general election. 2 in succession. It's only happened before in modern times during the 2 world wars. How on earth does the will of the Conservative Party membership get negated in 6 weeks, 4 of which were occupied with royal mourning and with politics on hold?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think we have just witnessed a coup, but I don't think it's a globalist World Economic Forum coup. I think it's a coup carried out by the financial markets. So the reason I think that Liz was defenestrated is because the bond markets and the currency markets rejected her mini budget. Why did they reject her mini budget? Because in the past 2.5 years, because we borrowed so much money to pay people to stay at home and not work during our 3 lockdowns, the national debt has increased from somewhere around 1.8 trillion to where it is now, up at 2.45 trillion. It's roughly 100% of GDP, which is a Rubicon you don't want to cross. Inflation is in double figures. And, you know, when the money markets were confronted by a mini budget which proposed to cut taxes, put an energy bailout in place which was worth up to 200 billion, didn't have any real plan for tackling inflation, they balked. They said, no, this is unacceptable. We want rid of Liz Truss. So the party duly did the bidding of the currency markets and the bond markets, got rid of Liz Truss. And I think when they considered the alternative to Rishi Sunak, which was Boris Johnson, the financial markets made it clear what they thought about that. Gilt yields started to rise as soon as Boris declared he might be a candidate. And when he said he'd got to above the 102 threshold in order to be nominated, they rose again. So I think that was the reason. Ultimately, Boris withdrew. He didn't want to spook the markets. And so we've got the only candidate that the markets will have found acceptable.
Well, wait a minute. You keep talking about spooking these all-powerful markets. Where were the all-powerful markets when the guy who was responsible for most of these things, Rishi Sunak, was busy closing down the economy and doing things like paying the peasants of the United Kingdom a fee to go to the Greasy Spoon and have your full Ulster fry or the full English or whatever. Why were the markets not spooked by anything so transparently stupid as paying people not to work?
Well, I think they weren't spooked then, not in the same way they were when Liz and Kwasi unveiled the mini budget, because our national debt wasn't as high then. What Rishi was proposing to do was borrow roughly £400 billion to pay people to stay home and not work. But at that point, the markets could manage that. The yields on gilts didn't rise because our national debt at that stage was just about manageable. But to propose to borrow another 200 billion and to cut taxes by 45 billion and not cut public expenditure at all, that was a step too far, I think, as far as the currency markets and the bond markets were concerned. And only Rishi, I think, that was the only candidate acceptable to those markets. And I think that within very short order, he's going to announce savage cuts to public expenditure.
Well, we'll see about that. I've been saying, I mean, I listen to these complacent UK Tories saying, oh, things could be as bad as 1997. And I've said it for weeks now that no, the relevant comparison is the Canadian Tories in 1993. The polls are confirming that. The polls are confirming Labour would win 500 out of 650 seats, and His Majesty's loyal opposition would be the Scottish National Party, who, exactly like the Quebec separatists 30 years ago in Canada, are not in the least bit loyal and do not even recognise the sovereign or the head of the country he or she purports to lead. What's going to prevent a Canadian meltdown?
It's very difficult to see what's going to prevent that, Mark. That was my reason for backing Boris. I wasn't overlooking his manifold shortcomings. Rather, the argument was the choice isn't between Boris and Rishi. The choice is between a Conservative government or a Labour government led by Keir Starmer. And if you put Rishi in as leader, in all likelihood, you're going to get Keir Starmer as the next prime minister. Whereas if they put Boris in, I think at least the Conservatives might have had a chance of winning the next general election. Now I think that chance has gone, and it's just a question of damage limitation. How many seats can Rishi Sunak hold on to? Because I think it's very unlikely he's going to win an overall majority in 18 months' time.
Thank you very much, Toby. Appreciate your view as always. Patrick O'Flynn is a former Euro MP, but he's put all that behind him now. He's been clean for some years when it comes to that bad habit. And he joins us now. Patrick, given the scenarios, the market seem to think this is the best possible outcome. How is the Tory party membership going to feel about being cut out of the deal entirely?
Well, good evening, Mark. They feel very sore. There's no doubt about that. I was just looking at my Twitter feed and someone had tweeted the page you need to click on to disaffiliate from the Tory party, to give up your membership. And the message was on there that it was overloaded and basically come back tomorrow. So there's definitely a leach out of grassroots members. And obviously Rishi Sunak lacks a certain amount of legitimacy, as you were explaining with Toby Young. He's not only arrived without a general election, but without a full party leadership election either. And if I was him, Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday, I would do something quite tribal and have a real go at Keir Starmer and give those grassroots disillusioned members a bit of red meat so they can at least think, well, we don't like our guy, but we still think he's a lot better than the Labour Party. So that would be my advice to his aides: is get working at some sort of vulgar populism to kick Keir Starmer in the shins on Wednesday.
Well, I'm still trying to wrap my head about what you just said about the website for cancelling your Tory party. I mean, it's one thing to have a 10-month wait for the maternity award in the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham, or whatever it is up to by now. It's quite another thing that there's now a waiting list to resign from the Conservative and Unionist Party. Fantastic. Just on that point you were making, though, that he needs to do some, fire and brimstone populism, toss some populist red meat to the snarling masses. He's hopeless at that. Nigel played these embarrassing clips of him being utterly... He's become the Prime Minister. He's supposedly a glass ceiling shattering Prime Minister. It ought to be an historic day for him. He just did his usual wooden, wind me up routine and watch me deliver the lines in as leaden a way as possible. You tweeted quite correctly that there's a difference between candidates who connect with the people, as whatever one feels about them, Blair and Johnson did, and then these no-hopers like Gordon Brown or Liz Truss who don't. Which category does Sunak fall into?
Well, I think there'll be a few nerves in Tory ranks about that, even among the MPs, because thinking back to the lockdown, Rishi Sunak was actually quite fluent in giving his press conferences and did sort of soothe the fevered brow of people about the future state of the economy, and was thought to be terrifically fluent. But that clearly deserted him, and it was, the Rishi bot rather than fluent walking, talking Rishi. But I'll tell you how I'm going to judge him, not particularly on the economy, because I think he's quite smart and he'll do reasonably smart things. I'm going to judge him on his pledge he gave in the leadership election against Truss, that he was going to sort out the abused UK asylum system within his first 100 days as Prime Minister. He was going to have a new definition for what an asylum seeker was, and if you didn't fulfil it and you come in illegally, you weren't going to be permitted to stay. And he said he would get it all done in 100 days. So I'm setting my stopwatch or whatever for the end of January, and we'll see if he's done it. My cynic inside me says he's not even going to try and do that. But if he could do that, if he could get a grip on the Channel boats and show he's serious about this agenda, I think that could do something to reconnect him with the Red Wall voters. I don't think Keir Starmer and Labour are comfortable in that territory at all. But the suspicion is he's one of those very rich, highly educated people who only feels comfortable in the company of other very rich, highly educated people and can't indeed talk to the masses.
No, that's very true. That's a clip of him visiting a school and trying to talk to ordinary English schoolboys was a complete disaster. I also find, just quickly as a final question here, Patrick, to me he although he's bought some palace in North Yorkshire, he seems to have no feel for the Union. But when you ask him, say, about Scotland or Northern Ireland, 3/4 of the home nations seem utterly alien to him.
Yeah, I think we'll have to see how he does on visits there. I don't think he's regarded with such hostility in Scotland, which is the bit that they seem to be most worried about, as Boris Johnson was. Whether he'll come through on Northern Ireland in taking a hard line with making the protocol better, we'll wait and see. I'm totally unsighted about how he's regarded in Wales, I must admit. But I don't think he's sort of hostile to the Union. But he claims to be a Northerner, doesn't he? But he was born in Southampton. And if anyone knows the constituency of Richmond in North Yorkshire, it's not exactly, dark satanic mills, put it like that.
No. No trouble up mill in Richmond, Yorkshire at all. Thank you very much, Patrick. Great
Pleasure.
to see you. We're going to get to your thoughts. Actually, if you're among the downtrodden in Richmond, North Yorkshire, do let us know. You can't all be as rich as Rishi Rich. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Vicky Spit will be here on how our political classes may screw the country, but they certainly know how to take care of their own. And Sir Christopher Chope is here from the Tory benches. Plus, Yasmin Mohammed on what appears to be a permanent feature of English life.
Good.
Because Prime Ministers and Home Secretaries come and go and do not a thing about it. Yasmin and all that coming up in just a moment.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, We're
on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
GB News is the People's Channel, so let's channel what the people are saying. We wanted to know whether you thought Rishi Sunak could win a general election. Gillian says he is the establishment choice. He will not bring the party together. Members are disgusted. His premiership is not legitimate. He was roundly rejected by the membership. The sooner we have an election, the better. Hillary says, I can't see so-called red wall voters such as myself voting for a robotic globalist. We're not supposed to call Rishi a globalist. I see something that apparently it's anti-Semitic to call Rishi a globalist. I had no idea he was Jewish. He doesn't look Jewish, except he's about the same height as Sammy Davis Jr., but other than that. Sharon says, absolutely not. He sold us out. He stabbed Boris in the back and had a golden handshake with the grey suit. Salty Stan says, no, he definitely will not, but he will hand a UK Labour-led coalition a healthy economy. Don't get behind on this stuff, Stan. The latest the general election can be held is January 2025. If you think that Rishi Sunak, the man who signed on to the devastation all around you, the inflation, the price of energy, the size of your energy bill, and all the other nonsense that is around us, if you think he can correct his own mess by January 2025, I don't think that's going to be. And it won't be a Labour-led coalition unless they want it. Unless they're planning... I mean, the thing is, if you've got 500 Labour members in the House of Commons, which is what some of the polls are predicting, plus 48 Scottish National Party MPs, so you've got 550 Labour SNP, they can do pretty much what they want to you. But the thing is that if he's being elected, or installed by whoever to turn the economy around, the problem is what the markets mean by turning the economy around and what you may have in mind by turning the economy around may be two very different things. The King is the fount of honour in the United Kingdom and in all his other realms. So it is absolutely preposterous that the very first honours list of His Majesty's reign should be the resignation honours of Liz Truss. If you served Miss Truss these last 6 weeks, her failure is yours. The idea that you should get a knighthood or peerage for being part of the shortest prime ministership in history is absurd. And if Liz is determined to go ahead with it, no self-respecting person should accept such a knighthood or peerage. And if you do accept that, that will say far more about you than your admission to the alleged ranks of chivalry or nobility. The minions get gongs, but what does the departing PM get? A pension of 115,000 quid per annum for life. Our friend Vicky Spitt, who has been on this show many times, is the first person in the United Kingdom to be recognised by the government as having been damaged by the COVID vaccine. She is a widow in her 30s because Xeon, the love of her life, was killed by the AstraZeneca shot. And so the government fessed up and gave her the maximum payout of £120,000. Now, that's not 120 grand every year. It's just a one-off. So Xeon's entire life is valued at more or less the exact amount of a comprehensively failed politician's annual pension. As Vicky tweeted, Truss is going to get £115,000 yearly for 44 days of, quote, work. I was given a one-off payment of £120,000 for Xeon's entire 48 years and the rest of my entire life. And Z, or Z, never bleeped up the entire economy. Vicky Spitt joins us now. Vicky, this actually isn't a small point, is it? The amount of money that they're proposing to shower on Liz Truss, who is relatively young and could live another 40 or 50 years, is absolutely absurd. And the amount that the government grudgingly gave you is, by comparison, derisory.
It is absolutely disgusting, especially when you consider that people who have suffered 60%, 70%, 80%, 90% vaccine injuries, who will never be able to work a day again in their lives, who've had to spend all their savings refurbishing their homes so they can continue to live in their homes, who have been at risk of losing their homes because they haven't been able to work for the last year and a half, some of them, coming up for 2 years for many, because the VDPS hasn't given them a penny. These people are going to get £120,000 and a pat on the head and be told, there you go, you're sorted now, you can live a wonderful, happy life. By the way, we're also going to cut all of your benefits. Yes, we understand you've burned through all your savings to support yourself for the last year and a half. We understand that you're using this money to pay back all the debts, catch up on your mortgage, and you're going to have a very little amount left afterwards. But yeah, we're not going to continue universal credit. Just come back to us when you're completely broke, and we will pay you a subsidised living amount, which is not what you were used to and not what you expected to be spending the rest of your life with. But hey.
So you're basically saying here, Vicky, that when you add it all out, it comes out as a wash, or maybe you're even a little bit worse off, because in return for cashing the check, so in return for cashing the check for 120,000, you lose your access to so many other government programs that in effect they've managed to not only to kill Xeon, but also to steal money from you in the final analysis.
I'm not specifically talking about myself. I'm talking about injured people who are going to need lifelong care. And they're going to have to rely on the government to provide that care. And the government has made it very clear they're not going to provide that care. So they're going to have to pay for it out of their own pocket. It's not good enough.
You have, and others have made the point that they seem to be they're stonewalling this thing. They've paid you, and they've paid maybe a dozen other people, and there are and at the present rate of adjudicating these cases, it will take some 300 years to clear the backlog. On the other hand, Liz Truss isn't going to be waiting that long to get her 115,000 quid a year, is she?
I'm sure she won't. I'm sure she'll pay her expenses and it'll be sorted within a fortnight. Whereas, interestingly, Gareth Eve, I don't know if you're aware, he received notice last Friday that he had been awarded the VDPS payment. Interestingly, this was the day after Gareth stood up at the APPG and spoke about the failings of the VDPS. Right. The very next day, he got a phone call.
Yeah, it's, as you said, it's the greasy, it's the whatever it is, it's the noisy wheel that gets the grease, or whatever. Yeah, that gets the oil. Yeah, you're absolutely quite right about that, Vicky, but it's disgusting that it should have to be this way. You attended this hearing in Parliament last week, and you presumably saw the debate earlier today. What did you make of it?
I unfortunately was not able to attend the APPG, dog issues, but I did watch it, and I did obviously watch the debate today. The debate today, I found it actually heartening. I think Sir Christopher Chope, Danny Kruger, Andrew Bridgen, and Natalie Elfwick, I think they all spoke up for us beautifully. And all of them made the point that we aren't anti-vaxxers. We are genuinely injured people, and we deserve to be treated with respect and care and acknowledged. And that's a really big step forward, because for the last nearly 2 years, we've been lumped in as anti-vaxxers, and we've been treated as cranks and lunatics and extremists. So this is a massive step forward for us, I think.
Thank you for saying that, Vicky. We need some good news at the moment. And, you know, the media aren't the whole story here. There's buffoons on Twitter, and there's idiot presenters on this or that station who mock you in your grief. But there are thousands upon thousands up and down this land who support you and want to see justice for you. Thank you very much for talking to us again, Vicky, and the best of luck. And say hi to your delightful dogs for me, whose company I miss in the studio. They're great whenever they come here. By the way, just a message to the outgoing Prime Minister, who I think departs the scene after her meeting with the King tomorrow morning. Don't insult the people of this country, whom you and your colleagues have lowered into catastrophe. Have the integrity to decline that 115 grand a year. I'm told that technically it's not a pension, it's not a salary, it's just for expenses. Liz Truss is as comprehensively over as it's possible to be. She has no need of a six-figure sum for expenses when the people on the other end of her rule are having to struggle to get a lousy 120 grand to last to the end of their life. As you know, if you can get 100,000 signatures, you can get your issue debated in the Palace of Westminster. So Vicky and her chums, and we certainly pushed it on this show, helped get 100,000 votes to have a debate on victims of the COVID vaccines. And that debate was scheduled for early September. And then in early September, the Queen died. And so it was postponed from the death of the sovereign to the day of a new Prime Minister. Today's debate was not in certain respects, although Vicky certainly appreciated some comments, but it was not entirely Westminster's finest hour. Here is Elliot Coburn, the member for Carshalton.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for that intervention. I've not seen the publication he mentions. I have read a lot of the significant amounts of material that have been shoved through my constituency office door by a large number of anti-vax protesters in my own constituency. And considering the content of that literature includes climate change denial, moon landing denial, etc., I'm inclined to ignore their content completely.
That's a Tory member, by the way. Christopher Chope is here. You could see him sitting behind that guy. And Sir Christopher has been one of the few friends the thousands of vax victims have in Parliament. And we're always glad to see him. What did you make of that intervention by one of your colleagues?
Well, I described it, Mark, as being an example of producer capture, basically, and everything that my friend put forward seemed to have been written for him by the MHRA, and it persisted in this false narrative that people who are concerned about the safety of the vaccines are all nutters of one sort or another and anti-vaxxers, which we're not. And he failed to appreciate that. And that's why I was drawing his attention to the Oracle film about a second opinion. And he admitted that he hadn't looked at it, despite having a comprehensive research for this debate, which seems to have gone no further than just the MHRA, frankly.
Now, when you say the MHRA, that's the, whatever it is, the Medical Health Regulatory Agency, which instead of being an impartial regulator, seems to have fancied itself more as a promoter of big pharma, for want of a better expression. It has a basic conflict of interest that you would never get away with if you were on a board of directors or if you were a judge hearing a legal case. Just explain that basic conflict to us, Sir Christopher.
Well, Mark, the basic conflict is that almost all the income of the MHRA, which goes to pay its staff and its officials, it comes from Big Pharma itself. I think between 80 and 90% of the income of the MHRA comes from subscriptions from Big Pharma. So it's hardly surprising, is it, that Big Pharma's viewpoint seems to be very prominently reflected in what the MHRA says. The MHRA would dispute that, but I think it's important that there should be transparency, and there should be that should be seen. That they should be seen to be independent, and they can't be seen to be independent if they're receiving so much money from the people they're meant to be regulating.
That's absolutely right. We should also say, with reference to the guy going on about anti-vaxxers and people denying the moon landings, that since you took interest in the victims of the vaccine, you have been the soul of moderation. You've been always concerned not to get too far out over your skis on these things, and you've asked for no more than acknowledging these people were damaged by the vaccine and should be compensated. On the other hand, with almost every passing week in every part of the developed world, whether you're talking about Canada or Australia or Denmark or the United States, there are more and more shocking things coming out about the impact of these vaccines. Why do you think that the UK government cannot just say, we still think these vaccines are great, but people have been injured by them, and so here's your 120 grand, and we hope that's good? Why can't they just do that?
Well, I think that's a very good question, and we were trying to get the answer from the Minister today. I think partly officials in the Department of Health are still in denial about the fact that the vaccines do cause damage. Indeed, in certain cases, sadly, they cause death, as Vicky Spit knows. And today, the Minister used that expression again, which has been used by her predecessor, namely that she accepted that for some people, the vaccine hadn't produced the desired outcome. And what she meant by that was that for some people, it had been fatal. But why didn't she say that? Because the government, it seems, is still in denial about the extent of serious injuries that are flowing, and sadly, in some cases, fatalities. So there's a real problem there. But I hope that today we were able to make a bit of a dent in it, the government's approach. But this is an iterative process, and it's an important campaign which we rely on so much from help from you and GB News. But if we can get this into the mainstream media a bit more, then I think we've got the hope of being able to make big progress. And it was good today that we not only had the 4 MPs Vicky was referring to, but I think Sir John Hayes was also there making an intervention, expressing his scepticism. So there's another recruit to our side. And even the SNP spokesman seemed to be pretty sceptical about the government's approach and the line that all these vaccines are safe and there's no need for any investigation.
Well, we hope so, and thank you for sticking with it. And as you say, I certainly wouldn't. I'd be relieved not to have to talk about this, because the BBC and ITV were on it all day long. I should say that what your friend said about, every drug has side effects, and that's true. That's true of aspirin and anything more sophisticated than that. But the ethical standard is you shouldn't be asked or made to take a medical intervention that you don't really need, as many of these young and middle-aged people had no need to take this thing. Thank you very much, Sir Christopher Chope. It is always a pleasure to see you. Stump the Steyn looms. Ask me anything at gbviews@gbnews.uk. Also, Prime Ministers come and go, but everything else just chunters on, impervious to change. Last Thursday, a shocking report was issued. Well, except that it didn't shock anybody, because the entire nation was focused solely on the implosion of yet another worthless Prime Minister. So we'll try to be belatedly shocked with Yasmin Mohammed. That's coming up. Don't go anywhere.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Did you hear about the final report of Baroness J's independent inquiry into child sexual abuse? It came out on Thursday. Pretty big deal. The inquiry took 7 years to complete. So that's what, 112 times the length of Liz Truss's premiership, and indeed twice as long as Boris's. It was so long ago, in fact, that David Cameron was Prime Minister. Remember him? No, me neither. Lady J and her chums heard testimony from 7,000 child victims of gang rape, sex slavery, torture, kidnapping and other forms of predation. As our friend Samantha Smith, a survivor of the depraved hellhole of Telford, puts it, quote, the report uncovered a culture of institutional indifference and hostility towards victims, where victims were frequently blamed and accused of lying when they sought help. Yasmin Mohammed is author of the book Unveiled, How Western Liberals Empower Radical Islam. And Yasmin, I think about the subtitle of your book a lot because, you know, you think these things, it's all the fault of these guys and their attitudes to women. But actually, how Western liberals empower radical Islam. You basically see the crude violent side of that in all these English towns.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is that's the way these men are going to behave because they believe that this is acceptable behavior. So of course it's their fault and of course they're criminals, but I am not going to fault a snake for acting like a snake. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I'm going to try and protect myself from that snake and try to keep that snake away from, you know, any vulnerable people. But if there are people that are actually protecting the snake and allowing the snake to do his thing and say, you know, this is diversity and inclusion, or ignoring what the snake is doing because we don't want to be seen as, you know, snakeophobic or whatever, they are the people that I'm going to be blaming. So that's therefore the subtitle of my book.
And we see it, we've seen it really since September the 12th, 2001, when weirdly every Western leader thought the priority after what had happened was to get himself to a mosque and declare that Islam is a religion of peace. Whatever one feels about Islam, there's a little bit more to it than that. But there's something, and you know, I can kind of understand that in the geopolitics, but I don't understand it when it comes to local councillors and social workers and policemen on the streets of Rotherham and Rochdale and Oxford and Aylesbury and all the rest.
I think everybody has been terrified by this word Islamophobia. Everybody, you know, so the way I describe it is, so you have the terrorists, you know, you have the violent acts, you have the stabbing of Salman Rushdie, you have the killing of the Charlie Hebdo journalists, you have the stabbings all over, you know, you had Manchester, the Ariana Grande concert. I mean, the examples are endless. So that kind of terrorism is successful, obviously. It makes people scared into silence. And along the same vein, people doing the exact same work are the ones that use the term Islamophobia, or they'll try racist, bigot, whatever it is. Both groups of people are trying to silence any criticism towards this religion, towards this ideology. And so what happens is you'll have regular people, police officers, journalists, politicians, everybody is now scared into silence, whether it's from Group A or Group B. It's enough for them to just accept all sorts of different atrocities and to, turn their face and pretend they can't see it because they don't want to deal with the backlash of what could happen if they do speak out.
There was a very cynical line going back almost 50 years that the Home Office in London used to use about the so-called Irish Troubles, that they wanted to, and MI5 were on board with this, that they wanted to hold it down to what they call, quote, an acceptable level of violence. In English cities, the guys who run them seem to think they can hold it down to an acceptable level of child gang rape. I mean, that is even more disgusting, isn't it?
I can't even wrap my brain around what is an acceptable level of child violence. Obviously there is no acceptable level. You mentioned that report that came out, and one of the great things about the conclusion is they talked about if there are people in positions of authority that do see any of this kind of, child, exploitation going on, and if they don't report it and if they don't follow the guidelines and do what needs to be done, then they are going to be held accountable. So I think that's a very important positive step towards encouraging people to, even if they feel like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? What are people going to say about me? Am I going to lose my job? Are people going to call me Islamophobic, or whatever fears they might have, knowing that they have no choice, that they have to come forward, they have to be vocal, they have to, expose what's going on. I think that's really going to be helpful.
Well, if they actually do anything about it, a lot of it seems to be, all these reports read the same, and what they say is that young Muslim men in these English towns distinguish between nice, pious Muslimas who are marriage material, and then what they regard as white slags, the girls who walk around dressed like Britney Spears or whoever it is these days, who are just fair game.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate truth. And it's within the Muslim community as well. The difference between how a girl who wears hijab is treated versus a girl who doesn't wear hijab. I mean, we see with what's happening in Iran these days with Iranian women burning their hijabs in the streets, and this is becoming more of a topic that people are more comfortable talking about. And I've seen endless op-eds where women from all over the world are writing about how this hijab has been used as this bludgeon against women for so long. And so you're absolutely correct. When they see a woman that is covered up the way they deem to be correctly covered up, then they'll respect her. And if she's not covered up, and if she's not Muslim, my goodness. The respect just, decreases and decreases.
That's true, Yasmin. We're going to stay on this. Let's do one quick stump before we're out of here. Brandon asks, Mr. Steyn, can Rishi Sunak improve at reading an autocue? It's nothing to do with reading an autocue. He's that wooden when he's talking to Mrs. Sunak at the breakfast table when they wake up in the morning. That is the issue there. And Liz says the vaccine damage debate, I was horrified that the SNP and Labour are denying the devastation. He's here, the man who's going to macerate your Monday like nobody's business, Dan Wootton. What you got, Dan?
Mark Steyn, well, where do we start tonight? I think I feel like Toby Young on your show earlier, actually, Mark, pretty disillusioned about the state of the Conservative Party, which actually doesn't believe in democracy, does it? And is starting to resemble a banana republic. So we're going to break it all down, Mark. Where is the hope? Well, Neil Oliver will be here to provide some.
Well, the thing about banana republics is they have a strong man. And the strong man rules with an iron grip. If you're changing strong man every 6 weeks, they may not be that strong. It's very weird. That's all coming up with Dan, the best late night show on telly. Don't you miss a moment of it. It all starts after the weather. Stay safe, stay free.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. Next few days stays very similar. Further sunny spells, scattered showers and exceptionally mild for the time of year too. Looking at the pressure pattern, well, very similar to what it has been. Low pressure remains in charge, sat just to the west of the UK, meaning strongest winds, outbreaks of rain, more likely in the west, some drier interludes, particularly in the east. Through the rest of Monday into the early hours of Tuesday morning, there will be a few showers around, though most places will stay dry and we'll see plenty of clear spells developing. Under these clear spells, it will start to turn a little chillier than it has done of late, temperatures dipping into single figures. But that means quite a dry start, a bright start to the day on Tuesday morning, plenty of sunny spells, but there will be showers from the word go. They will continue on and off through the day, but a lot of places staying dry. However, later on in the day, particularly through the afternoon, evening time, outbreaks of rain will arrive across parts of Cornwall, Devon and later southwest Wales. Turning quite windy here. Elsewhere, winds coming in from the south are drawing in quite warm air, highs of 18 or 19 Celsius. Definitely the theme of October. Through the evening time, we'll see that rain push northwards through the Irish Sea, affecting parts of Wales, then later Northern Ireland and into the early hours southern parts of Scotland, clouding over across much of the UK as the night progresses. And temperatures, well, with a lot of cloud around, it will be on the mild side, 12 to 15 or 16 Celsius as minimum temperatures. This is where they should be as maximum temperatures during the day. So cloudy start to Wednesday morning, showery outbreaks of rain pushing their way north and eastwards, most persistent and heavy across northern parts of Scotland. But it will brighten up as the morning progresses and into the afternoon. Yes, there will be a few showers around. It will be quite a blustery day, but it will be on the mild side. And that continues over the next few days. We'll see sunshine and showers across much of the country and temperatures remain well above average.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's